For more than 2 decades on television, the courtroom had seen every kind of dispute imaginable pass before Judge Judy Shaindlin. Unfaithful spouses, dishonest renters, shady contractors. Case after case built on deception had played out under her watch. Yet through all those years, across every heated argument and emotional testimony, one thing had never happened. Not once had Judge Judy allowed herself to cry. Her reputation was built on precision, control, and an unshakable refusal to show vulnerability. That changed the morning James Mitchell stepped into her courtroom, a folded letter tucked carefully inside the pocket of his worn military jacket. He stood at the defendant's podium, hands lightly trembling against the wooden rail. At 67, he carried the weight of a life that had clearly not been kind. His face was deeply lined, marked by hardship, sleepless nights, and quiet suffering. The faded army jacket he wore spoke of years past, but the Purple Heart pinned to his collar still caught the light, a silent testament to sacrifice. Across from him sat Patricia Brennan, sharply dressed in an expensive suit, her posture confident and composed. She had brought a claim against him for $8,500, unpaid rent, property damage, lease violations, and refusal to vacate after eviction. Her briefcase lay open, filled with neatly organized evidence, photographs, reports, statements. Everything about her case appeared solid, convincing, airtight. On paper, it looked simple. Another tenant who had failed to pay damaged property and refused responsibility. Judge Judy adjusted her glasses and reviewed the file. Patricia Brennan versus James Mitchell, thousands in unpaid rent, additional thousands in alleged damages, months of documented violations. She looked up. James stood still, his gaze lowered to his hands. Despite everything, there was still something of a soldier in his posture, rigid, disciplined, though clearly worn down by life. She had seen thousands of defendants. She could usually sense the truth almost instantly. But something here didn't sit right. There was a quiet imbalance. Patricia's confidence contrasted too sharply with James's defeated stillness. Patricia began speaking first, her tone professional, detached. Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter. The defendant damaged my property and refuses to take responsibility. She explained how James had moved into her apartment complex, how things had been fine at first, and then how complaints began issues, damage to walls, broken fixtures. She described her attempts to resolve the situation, her patience, her eventual decision to proceed with eviction when he allegedly refused to comply. She presented photographs. The images showed a small apartment in disarray. Damaged walls, broken sink, worn fixtures. Judge Judy examined them carefully before turning her attention to James. Mr. Mitchell, do you have anything to say? He lifted his head slowly. His eyes were tired, red, carrying something deeper than simple stress. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was worn from repeated handling, creased and softened at the edges, clearly something he carried everywhere. Your Honor, he said, his voice unsteady, this is from my daughter. She wrote it before she died. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. Judge Judy took the letter gently and unfolded it. As her eyes moved across the page, something in her expression changed. The sharpness softened, replaced by something more human, more fragile. She read it again, slower this time. Silence filled the room. Even Bailiff Byrd seemed to sense the weight of the moment, stepping slightly closer. The audience sat motionless. Patricia shifted in her seat, her earlier confidence beginning to falter. Judge Judy placed the letter down, but kept her hand resting on it. Mrs. Brennan, she said quietly, this letter is from Mr. Mitchell's daughter, Sarah. She was also a veteran, an Army medic. She lived in your apartment complex. She paused. And according to this letter, she fell behind on rent while she was dying of cancer, and you evicted her. The room reacted instantly. Gasps, murmurs. Disbelief, Patricia's face tightened, but she quickly tried to regain control. Your Honor, I don't see how this is relevant. Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice now edged with restrained anger. It's extremely relevant because what this letter describes is not an isolated incident. It suggests a pattern, and I had my research team look into your business practices. The tone in the courtroom shifted completely. Patricia had walked in expecting an easy win. She had no idea everything was about to unravel. Judge Judy continued, now methodical. She confirmed Patricia owned multiple apartment buildings marketed specifically to veterans, presenting herself as someone who supported those who served. But then came the questions. How many veteran tenants had she evicted? Patricia hesitated, offering a lower estimate. Judge Judy corrected her. 23 cases in 3 years. A pattern began to emerge. Each tenant had stayed a similar length of time. Each had been charged excessive damage fees. Each had been pushed into collections when they couldn't pay. When confronted, Patricia attempted to justify it, suggesting that veterans often struggled with personal issues that led to property damage. Judge Judy's patience wore thin. Let's talk about Sarah Mitchell, she said. She laid out the facts. Her service, her illness, her financial struggles during chemotherapy. Then came the critical moment. You evicted her while she was dying. Judge Judy stated plainly, Patricia defended herself with legality. I followed the law. But legality wasn't the issue anymore. Judge Judy read aloud from Sarah's letter. Her words revealed everything. How she had been approached in the hospital. Asked to pay for damages while she was dying, how she warned her father that Patricia targeted vulnerable veterans. By the time Judge Judy finished reading, the courtroom was silent. And for the first time in her long career, her eyes filled with tears. James stood there, crying openly. Patricia's composure was gone. The hearing paused briefly, then resumed with new intensity. Judge Judy returned with financial records. What she revealed next shattered the entire case. Hundreds of thousands of dollars collected in damage claims from veteran tenants. A contractor charging unusually high fees. A contractor who, it turned out, was Patricia's own brother. The scheme became clear: low rent to attract vulnerable veterans. Minor issues documented and exaggerated, inflated repair bills issued, evictions filed when tenants couldn't pay, deposits kept. Credit destroyed, cycle repeated. When questioned about James specifically, it became even more disturbing. He was the father of the woman she had evicted while dying, and yet she had rented to him again. Judge Judy didn't believe it was coincidence. She believed it was intentional. James spoke, revealing Patricia had acknowledged knowing his daughter and had presented herself as compassionate, but it had been a setup. The courtroom grew heavier with every revelation. A former tenant stepped forward, confirming similar treatment. The pattern was undeniable. Judge Judy ended the session briefly, then returned to deliver her decision. Her words were direct. James Mitchell owed nothing. All claims against him were dismissed. Instead, Patricia Brennan was ordered to pay significant damages, financial compensation for fraud, emotional distress, and deliberate exploitation. The total judgment reached $48,500. But it didn't stop there. Judge Judy ordered a full investigation, financial audits, and review of all past cases. State officials present in the courtroom stepped forward. Criminal charges were coming. Patricia's confidence had completely collapsed. She left the courtroom under scrutiny. Her business on the verge of destruction. James remained overwhelmed. Veterans in the audience came forward, offering support, housing, assistance. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone. Judge Judy returned Sarah's letter to him. Keep this safe, she said. It carried the truth, and that truth had changed everything. Months later, the case expanded into a full criminal trial. More victims came forward. The financial fraud was confirmed. The scheme was proven. Patricia Brennan was convicted and sentenced to years in prison. Her brother faced punishment as well. Restitution was ordered. Justice, though delayed, had arrived. James didn't celebrate. There was no sense of victory, only relief and the quiet presence of his daughter's memory. Her letter had done what she hoped. It had protected him. It had exposed the truth, and it had saved others. With support from fellow veterans, James rebuilt his life. Housing, benefits, stability, things he hadn't had in years, slowly returned. But more importantly, he found purpose. He began speaking out, warning others, helping veterans avoid similar traps. A support network formed, people bound together by shared experience. They named it in Sarah's honor. Her words became more than a memory. They became a force for change. Policies were influenced. Protection strengthened. Her story reached far beyond that courtroom. Years later, James still carried that letter, still visited her grave, still spoke her name. Because what she left behind wasn't just a warning, it was a legacy, a reminder that truth, even written in the final days of life, has the power to expose injustice, protect the vulnerable, and demand accountability. And in that courtroom, on that day, truth had done exactly that.